So I have to mention your TED Talk because that is maybe 2 full minutes of the 8 minutes of your TED Talk when you say, when you switched your focus from vanity to self-care, which is beautiful transformation, then the outside world started treating you differently in a very superficial way.
Even though Jasmine hadn't changed, well, you had changed, but you hadn't changed that drastically. They changed as if
their response to her changed.
Yeah.
So I am obsessed with your TED Talk. I've been clicking up its views because I've watched it 4 times. It's called Compassion Unlocks Identity, so that people can go watch it. It's a little over 8 minutes. It has completely, well, I was going to say it has completely set me free from self-berating, but I'm only like 3 days in because that's when I watched it. So we're going to check in again.
Well, it took Jasmine a week to get vegan, so get on it, girl.
Right. Okay, because I have been struggling big time in the last year or so with self-berating in a really big way. And part of the reason it's helped to set me free is because you talk about we need to see ourselves as our grandmother sees us. My grandmother was Dotsie. I have her name. And she saw me the way your grandmother saw her. And if we could just only do that, I'm sure there are some people out there that didn't have a great relationship with their grandmother. I recognize that and I hear you. But many of us did. And I saw my grandmother as a fairy tale princess queen or something. Right? Everything about her was extraordinary. And she saw me as extraordinary in every single way. So I've been working on this for 72 hours, but I just want you to weigh in on your grandmother and give them a little teaser of that TED Talk and that aspect that you talk about. How can we see ourselves like our grandmother saw us?
Well, you effectively made me cry. And I'm so happy to hear about your journey here. And I also appreciate the reminder today to see myself the way my grandmother saw me. Because like I said, it's an ongoing journey. We're not just going to reach it and then it's not going to be a struggle. But my grandmother was my strength. She was the most beautiful person I've ever known. And at the end of her life, a benign brain tumor took over her body and she wound up in a wheelchair. And she was also someone who was very head-turning, beautiful, very ravishing. And suddenly, as soon as I would wheel her around in her wheelchair, nobody would look at her anymore. They would look at me instead. They would address me about her. And she would look them in the eye and answer for herself. And that's because she never answered to anyone else. And she is the only person in my life who didn't care if I had lost, nearly 100 pounds, as long as I was actually living in alignment with what was best for me. She believed in me from the beginning. And like you said, a lot of our grandmothers had that, and they just brought this gentleness and this sweetness. And she was such a mentor to me and still is, even though she's been gone now for 5 years or 6 years. I carry with me the mentality that she brought into her life, which was kindness, and she wouldn't have stopped that with herself. We are so mean to ourselves. I mean, I have friends who come from abusive childhoods. I'm thinking of one friend in particular, and she tells me these stories of her as a little kid, like horrible, horrible abuse, like with no food whatsoever and like being left for days at a time. It's an egregious situation. And now I hear her struggling in similar ways in her relationship. And I say, do you look at little you and think that this is what you wanted for you? If we can look at ourselves as if we were that kid standing on the counter looking for the food that doesn't exist, then we might extend compassion to ourselves. And we cannot, in good faith, extend that compassion elsewhere, whether it's to our kids or to our communities, unless we have it starting on the inside. So that's what my grandmother taught me.
That's what you mean when you say in the TED Talk, the bully is ourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, I recognize that a lot of us have at some point been given a bad lot in life. And we don't need to perpetuate it anymore. It actually is as simple as shifting our mentality. It is actually that simple about just using different language. I have been addicted to negative self-talk. I have been addicted to the thoughts in my head. I have to intercept them and change my neural pathways and apologize to myself sometimes 100 times a day until that becomes the new normal. To not say, I hate you under my breath all day long, but to say, oh, didn't mean that. I actually love you. That's what it means to make amends with ourselves. That's what it means to show up differently in terms of treating ourselves with true compassion. I don't think we can treat ourselves with true compassion while we're eating animals, because it's not an extension of our worldview. It's not an extension of what we want to be doing, which is to cause pain to other groups. Well, similarly, I don't think we can actually show up with compassion if we're saying I hate you to ourselves 100 times a day. That's not going to help anyone.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.